Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The United States is denied it's behind a series of explosions that rocked parts of southern Iran overnight. Late Thursday, blasts were reported around the Bushehr nuclear power plant and in cities including Sadiq, Konarak, and Bandar Abbas. The explosions came during what was otherwise a lull in fighting between the U.S. and Iran following 2 days of tit-for-tat drone and missile attacks. They followed warnings by Israeli leaders that Israel's war against Iran is not over, though no one has claimed responsibility for the blasts. On Thursday, Iran's foreign ministry said top diplomat Abbas Araghchi had made phone calls to Omani and Turkish officials aimed at restarting diplomacy to end the conflict. Meanwhile, Israel's continuing attacks across southern Lebanon with air raids, gunfire, and home demolitions reported despite a U.S.-brokered ceasefire deal and despite the U.S. Memorandum of Understanding to end the war in Iran, which requires Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon. In Texas, more details have emerged in the fatal shooting of Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. The 52-year-old Mexican father killed Tuesday by ICE in Houston during his early morning commute to work in construction. Home surveillance video shared by Araujo's oldest son, Ronaldo Salgado, captured the final moments of his father leaving their family home and getting into his white van. A separate, newly released surveillance video appears to show Araujo's white van being followed by two unmarked black SUVs. At one point during the pursuit, a black SUV is seen driving on the wrong side of the road in a construction zone before cutting Araujo's van off. ICE agents then approached the passenger side of the vehicle. The footage, however, does not show Araujo's van ramming into any ICE vehicles or attempting to run over an agent, as the Department of Homeland Security alleged after Araujo was killed. Statements by three immigrants who were aboard Araujo's van and witnessed the shooting have also refuted the claims. The three men, one of whom is Araujo's younger brother, were rounded up after the shooting, are now in ICE detention facing deportations. In accounts obtained by the Washington Post, their lawyer reports the men said ICE agents fired at them almost immediately without warning from the side of Araujo's vehicle, and that Araujo never could have attempted to run over an agent because there were never any ICE officers in front of his van. Meanwhile, a DHS spokesperson has admitted federal immigration agents targeted Araujo by mistake and were, in fact, searching for a different person. Several Democratic Congress members are demanding the release of all video footage and to preserve evidence in the case, but DHS has said the ICE agents involved in the fatal shooting were not wearing body cameras. This comes as the Harris County Medical Examiner has reportedly ruled Araujo's manner of death a homicide. Harris County prosecutors say they plan to investigate, but cautioned the federal government ultimately controls access to the evidence. As the family of Araujo mourns, they say they've been unable to claim his body because immigration agents reportedly removed all of Araujo's personal identifications after he was shot in the abdomen and transferred to the hospital, which led to his being classified as John Doe. In the days after Lorenzo Salgado Araujo's death, hundreds of people have gathered for vigils at the site of his killing, placing candles, balloons, flowers to honor his life and continue demanding justice. Mexico's government says it'll file criminal complaints in the United States to protect the human rights of Mexican citizens caught up in the Trump administration's mass deportation sweeps. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced the plans during her daily news conference Thursday.
What we cannot ignore is the plight of the Mexicans who have died in ICE operations or who are being held in these detention centers operated by private companies contracted by ICE. That is why we are taking further action.
Mexico's Foreign Minister Roberto Velasco said 17 Mexican nationals have died while in the custody of ICE or at the hands of its agents. He's seeking criminal probes into the deaths and will also send cease and desist letters to the private prison companies that manage ICE jails.
La idea es pasar de la vía diplomática.
The idea is to move from diplomacy to the prosecutor's offices to demand investigations, not only from the State Department or the Department of Homeland Security, but directly through the criminal justice system.
In South Africa, human rights advocates are on alert after vigilantes in Johannesburg intensified attacks on immigrants, going door to door and snatching people from their homes to hand over to authorities. Thursday's attacks followed similar violence in Soweto, Durban, and other parts of South Africa. Anti-immigrant vigilantes had set an informal deadline of June 30th for all undocumented immigrants to leave South Africa, threatening to continue their harassment and intimidation campaign until their demands are met. Doctors Without Borders warns tens of thousands have been displaced by the violence, including asylum seekers, refugees, and documented immigrants. In Venezuela, the official death toll from last month's devastating twin earthquakes has topped 3,800 and expected still to soar as tens of thousands of people remain unaccounted for. Public health officials warn survivors of the earthquakes now face outbreaks of disease, along with difficulty accessing clean water, sanitation, and medical care. Some 16,000 people were left without shelter after the earthquakes flattened their homes. They've since been forced to live in overcrowded tent encampments. This is Pan American Health Organization Director Jarbas Barbosa.
In the coming weeks, the greatest health risks may stem not only from injuries caused by the earthquakes, but also from disruptions to health services, overcrowded conditions, deficiencies in water and sanitation, and reduced access to vaccination and routine care.
Russia's military says it shot down hundreds of Ukrainian drones overnight as Kyiv continues to target Russian energy sites. The latest attacks targeted ships and a port on the Sea of Azov and sparked a fire at a major oil refinery in southern Russia. This follows a Russian drone strike on a gas station in Zaporizhzhia that killed one person and injured 3 others, one of dozens of attacks across civilian areas of Ukraine on Thursday. At the United Nations, the Security Council heard testimony Thursday that Russian attacks in June killed at least 265 Ukrainian civilians, while leaving more than 1,800 injured. That's the highest combined casualty count since the first months of Russia's full-scale invasion 4 years ago. Meanwhile, Russian authorities report Ukrainian attacks have killed 250 Russian civilians in the first 6 months of this year. This is UN Political Affairs Chief Rosemary DiCarlo.
Any attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, wherever they occur, are a clear violation of international humanitarian law and must stop immediately.
The Palestinian Authority has announced plans to hold its first legislative elections in more than 20 years. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said Thursday votes will be held in Gaza, the occupied West Bank, and East Jerusalem on November 28th. Abbas is now 90 years old. He won a 4-year mandate in a 2005 presidential election and remained in power following a violent split between Hamas and Fatah the following year. Meanwhile, Israel is continuing its relentless attacks on the Gaza Strip, where airstrikes on Thursday killed at least 6 people. The attacks came as Haaretz reports Israel continues to hold the bodies of more than 100 Palestinians who've died in Israeli custody. That's despite the fact that no Israelis are currently being held hostage by Palestinian armed groups. Israel previously withheld the bodies of Palestinians as bargaining chips. In Washington, D.C., a bipartisan bill aimed at lowering the cost of housing is set to become law today, barring a last-minute veto by President Trump. Last month, Congress voted overwhelmingly to approve the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, which would cap the number of single-family homes major investors can purchase while loosening federal regulations to allow for new home construction. Trump has refused to sign the legislation so far unless lawmakers first approve the Save America Act to rewrite the U.S. election laws while imposing new voter ID requirements. If Trump takes no action, The housing bill will become law even without his signature. On Thursday, the National Association of Realtors reported the median home sales price of existing U.S. homes soared to over $440,000, a record high. President Trump's forced out the last remaining members of the Election Assistance Commission, a bipartisan independent agency tasked with certifying voting systems and helping local election officials. On Thursday, the White House fired Democratic Commissioners Thomas Hicks and Benjamin Holand. A third commissioner, Republican Christy McCormick, resigned. The committee's remaining member, Republican Donald Palmer, stepped down in April to join the Heritage Foundation. Trump's dismantling of the Election Assistance Commission comes less than 4 months before midterm elections. It follows last month's Supreme Court ruling granting the president more power to fire members of independent agencies. The Trump administrations threaten election administrators across the United States with criminal prosecution if they knowingly leave non-citizens on their voter rolls or allow them to receive or cast ballots. In a letter sent to all 50 states and the District of Columbia, the Justice Department warns state and local election officials could face fines and imprisonment. The letter concludes, quote, "We encourage you to contact us to discuss what steps your state should take to maintain clean voter lists as required by law," unquote. The letter was sent on Tuesday by Harmeet Dillon, head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. That same day, she announced plans to send election monitors to 15 jurisdictions in 6 states during upcoming primary elections.
So this is an important goal that increases voter confidence. And it's also important to make sure that our voting is accurate so that every citizen who votes has their vote counted equally without being canceled out by somebody who shouldn't be voting.
Meanwhile, FEMA's announced it'll withhold Homeland Security funding from states and cities until they provide proof of compliance with the Trump administration's election requirements. In response, Washington Congressmember Pramila Jayapal wrote, "The Trump administration's using fear and funding to control who gets to vote and who counts it. Elections belong to the people, not whoever is afraid of losing one," unquote. In China, at least 28 people are dead after a fire tore through a shoe factory in the southeastern city of Xinjiang. Authorities say the factory's stairwells were packed with materials hampering firefighters' rescue efforts. More than 200 workers were evacuated. It's the latest of several deadly industrial disasters in China this year and follows last November's fire at a residential complex in Hong Kong that left more than 160 people dead. And in southern China, the death toll from severe flooding triggered by Typhoon Maisak has climbed to 39 following days of torrential rain. This comes as authorities in Taiwan and southwestern Japan have issued warnings as the second major storm, Typhoon Bavi, approaches. At roughly the size of France, it's the largest typhoon to approach Taiwan in decades. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Hello, guys. Welcome to Stand Up Politics. Today we're going to speak a little bit about everything. And everything is what we can. You just saw the news. They're not very good news whatsoever. Especially since the Second World War. Since the Second World War, we have seen nothing but bad news in the hemisphere and now in the war against Iran. But it's something that began, like it was reported by many of the people that study these issues, departments of war, etc. And that is that it's not called the Department of Defense. It's called the Department of War in the United States because they already told us they were going to war against the world in the name of Israel. Israel calls the shots, their man, so Israel is calling the shots and nobody else, and it doesn't matter if you are a Republican or a Democrat in the United States of Israel. Only whomever thinks like Israelis is going to have a part in the new vision of Trumpism in the world, the so-called MAGA movement, Make America Gross Again. And that's what they're doing. America is very divided. The popularity of President Donald Trump is down to the charts, 17%. And he still insists on attacking Iran and supporting whatever happens against Russia. because, of course, NATO meeting told him that it's not only good enough that the countries have to cut their budget in education, in health services, and everything else, but they want to privatize them using the excuse of we have to cut the budget because you need to put 5%, as we anticipated in this program before anybody else 3 years ago, that from 2% it's going to go to 5%. I said it in person in React Today as part of the World Wealth Project, and it happened. When it happened, what they're doing is, we're going to go 5% of the GDP of each country in Europe in order to protect Israeli interests in America. We all know that President Donald Trump is a sold out for the Israeli lobby, a sold out for the oil and gas lobby, is a sold out for the tobacco industry, a sold out for the pharmaceuticals, everything that is money, man. Plata's plata. Money is money. It doesn't matter that it's going to cut services for hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people in the United States. It doesn't matter if it's going to affect hundreds of thousands of lives. With U.S. aid that doesn't only operate as a CIA cover for many operations that have been explained by the Gray Zone, for example, Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal, among others, that work for that independent broadcaster. So when you see all this happening, you have to make up your mind and say, okay, I want to live in a free world. I want to live in a free country. I live in Western tradition countries, Finland, Norway, Netherlands, etc. America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, let's say Western tradition, English is spoken, German spoken, etc. For centuries, Europeans have killed each other. They hate each other for whatever reason. They come with the understandings and then they destroy themselves, the 100-year war, the 30-year war. And they still want to insist that NATO has to say what America says. In the hands of this Secretary General for NATO, an embarrassing person, I have to say, that it's embarrassing to see this guy. Yes, Daddy. Daddy, yes, Daddy.
I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain, please, including visits. Okay, we don't want anything to do. Watch them come running back.
Mark, you sit next to Donald Trump in moments where he talks about conquering Greenland, talks about lashing out at allies like Spain, starting trade wars, things that it doesn't seem like the old Mark Rutte would approve of. Does this have any effect on your self-respect when you sit next to him like that and say nothing?
You know, what I always do is acknowledge when praise is due, and I think we should praise Donald Trump for the fact that NATO is so much stronger. Of course, it has to do with the Russian threat, it has to do with the war in Ukraine, but it very much also has to do with President Trump delivering now what since Eisenhower the United States tried to achieve, equalizing spending between the US and Europe. And it makes Europe stronger. It makes Europe more relevant for the United States as a partner.
That's what he's doing. Yes, Daddy. Everything that the United States demand from NATO, they are willing to do. And we know that America wants, of course, war with everybody else that Israel wants war with. And that includes now, of course, Turkey. We have spoke about this for many years, 11 years actually, way more than that when it comes to my radio years. But the fact that America is on the wrong path against the world, like I said many years ago, is not that the world is against America, it's that America is against the world, willingly, saying, okay, it's our way or the highway. And what is their way? Corruption, killing, assassinations, authoritarian, anti-democratic countries, the imposition of the state as a warlord.
The Gaza war, which the world has watched with horror and a UN commission has described as genocide, seems to have become doctrine for Israel. And now it seems they want to apply that doctrine in Lebanon.
צה"ל מתמרן לתוך שטח לבנון לתפיסת קו הגנה קדמי, מחסל מחבלי חיזבאללה והורס את תשתיות הטרור שהוקמו שם, וזאת בהתאם למודל רפיח ובית חנון.
Rafah, Beit Hanun, Israel reduced both cities to heaps of rubble, and along the way killed more than 72,000 people, many of whom were women and children. In Lebanon, the number of people killed by Israeli bombings grows by the day, and Israeli attacks on medical infrastructure have targeted hospitals and killed dozens of healthcare workers, including a 16-year-old volunteer.
Carl Jung spoke about this in his master work piece, The Unknown Self, in order to explain to us, the country and the world, how do we have to approach, or at least give us advice on how to approach the realities that we lived. That book was written in 1956, yeah, okay, whatever. But the point is, it still applies today, with the adjustments that we should add to his approach to what the citizens of the world should understand, how the state operates, how dictators operate, and what happened when religion and state mix together, which is what happened in the United States. He actually predicted what is happening in the United States and many countries in Europe when they believe that Genesis 12:3 is the one that we have to follow, that only it's going to benefit the state of Israel, and the division between ourselves. Because right now, even though I'm a Canadian citizen and my ancestry comes from Deutschland, that means Netherlands, Deutschland, they want us divided. Friends that I knew for 40 years now are using foul language, the worst language possible, that you only speak in the streets or in jail. Motherfuck piece of you, we're gonna kill you. There's nothing but lead coming to you, motherfuckers, etc. Didn't I know you for 40 years, dude? And now you're speaking to me like that? What did I do? Just to say that we can approach political issues and economic issues with a different point of view that is not the oligarchies and the plutocrats taking over? Do you have to kill me and said that you're going to kill me because I have proven to you, like statistics, like the numbers, like reality, like United Nations and organizations, human rights organizations have proven you wrong, and you still insist that I am the mother, the fucking piece of the all kinds of insults and foul language that I can use to. If I want to, I can be very good at it. Anybody can be super low spoken when it comes to refer to another. But after 40 years of friendship, I have decided these are not friends in reality. And like my father used to say, this is true and it's evident, and it's better for you to keep it within yourself, that your best friend is a traitor and the most truthfully one is lying to you. And yeah, all of a sudden I can be victimized by these people that I knew from 4 years ago, because they think different about politics and they think they can insult and use foul language, and that we're going to take it because they are using foul language and they're willing to take weapons and they're willing to say, mother, we're going to kill you all, you're going to whatever. Why? Because we want a better civilization, because we don't want Donald Trump plutocrats and corrupt people making billions of dollars out of the state and institutions, leaving millions of people in poverty and misery. And because misery and poverty shouldn't exist in the 21st century, especially when we have all this technology and people like Facebook, YouTube, all these that we use, because I created a company that is called Communications, right here, which doesn't receive any grants, which doesn't receive any support, despite being founded 10 years ago. Why is that? Because maybe I'm not a Zionist, because maybe I'm not looking for a Zionist goal, because I'm not looking for a worst world, but a good, better world. So I need to be deleted and extirpated, as the new president of Colombia in South America is saying, that the opposition, and like Donald Trump is saying, you're communist, you're socialist. Well, you're communist with your friends, and you're socialist with your friends. And you don't even know what socialism is. Socialism is what is social, which characterizes the democratic socialist parties of Europe, that once was the beacon to follow, the beacon to see in science, in philosophy, in mathematics, in everything. Europe was beautiful. Everybody wanted to be European. Everybody wanted to imitate Europe governments. Because of this issue, they were the beacon of philosophy, of economics, etc., until Milton Friedman came and the Chicago Boys took over in America, being them, of course, Jewish state, Israeli Zionists that started dictating economics in universities and Ivy League universities. And Ronald Reagan took over and said, okay, we're going to stop taking too much money from the super rich. We need that money. Let's privatize this. Let's privatize that. Saskia Sassen have spoke about that many times. He's mentioned in the videos before. And how poverty has taken over Europe. And that is because the rich people are taking over what is public. And what is public is public. Social democracies have characterized Europe for centuries, and especially after the First World War, when the separation of the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, the creation and the mandates in Syria, in Iraq, and the separation of one piece of the country, Lebanon, from Syria, in order to create two states in 1948. Etc. The Sykes-Picot Agreement and how they betrayed everybody else. They, even the Arabic countries, they promise everybody. The Sykes-Picot Agreement is nothing but a treasonous document. Thanks for the Balfour Declaration. For the Great Empire of England, which it was dying in those days, but it still was very influential, decided to say, hey, we're going to betray all of these people. Let's promise them land here. Let's promise them land there. The Hussein family that said, okay, we have all the legacy from Islam, and they were impressed with the presentation he did about the territories and the knowledge of Islam and how he declared as a custodian of the Islam heritage. And they used that in order to tell them, you send your people to help us defeat the Ottoman Empire. You're going to have your freedom. You're going to have your territories. Don't worry. You're going to have everything you want, your freedom and your nationalism. Again, nationalism was in the 1800s a Star-Spangled Banner, which everybody wanted to have. Some countries, including Muslim countries, didn't want to be oppressed or governed by the Ottoman Empire. It's natural. It happens. Nationalism was the truth, the true north that countries in Europe were looking for. There was the Austro-Hungary Empire, there was the Ottoman Empire, there was the Russian Empire, there was nothing but empires in there. So everybody was looking for independence from those empires and look for nationalism in order to be themselves. In many Arab countries were looking for that. So the British said, okay, we need this opportunity, we need to seize this opportunity. These guys are willing to fight and die for us, so let's use them. And they used them and betrayed them, because in the end, they never gotten the land that they were promised to have, or their independence. They were given some authority, but once, in the case of the Hussein, decided to say, hey, where is my authority? You promised me this and you promised me that. They shot him out, they sent the tanks, and the British, of course, the British mandate, and supported the Zionist state. That was before 1948, after the Sykes-Picot Agreement and after the Ottoman Empire was destroyed, creating the Lebanon and separating it from Syria. So when the Sykes-Picot Agreement betrayed everybody that served them and died for them, for the British, they never received anything, but just political crumbs, you know. But the mandate of the British stood with, and the French with Iraq and Syria. They both mandates stood there till the 50s and more, even longer. Why? Because they betrayed all of the Arabic countries that trusted them in order to find a solution for their independence and nationalism, what was the feeling in the 1800s, beginning of the 19th century. The Tsarism was destroyed, and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and all these matters. We already talked about that, but we have to resume here. What Donald Trump is doing, what NATO is doing, is still going against and for Russia in order to divide it into little pieces like they did with the mandates after the Ottoman Empire was destroyed. And now they're going to Turkey, against Turkey. So President Trump was speaking with President Erdogan a few hours ago, we can say that. And everybody's saying that it's good because then Donald Trump is going to make friends with Turkey, which is a very central operative strategic country, because the Kurds, because of their position geographically, because they also are very pragmatic. They are friends with enemies that are fighting each other, and they are friends with friends, and whenever it's convenient, and they can separate of any of the agreements if they feel like. like they give space to Israel to operate. They also cooperate with Israel when it's convenient with them. But Israel has said that the next target after Iran is Turkey. So when you see people that are saying that the approach of President Trump it's the right approach with Turkey, you don't get it. I was looking to TYT. It's a very, I like it. Sync you, whatever his name is. All respect for you, Mr. And Ana Kasparian. Yeah, sure. But they were saying that it's okay, that it's wonderful that President Trump is speaking with Turkey. I don't think so. President Trump is giving a hook to Turkey in order for them to follow Donald Trump. And once Donald follow Donald Trump, Israel is going to come and take over Turkey. If you believe that President Donald Trump is for Turkey, you're wrongly mistaken. President Donald Trump, and that is for you, TYT, in my opinion, Sink and Ana Kasparian, of the Young Turks. It was also a revolution. The Young Turks was a revolution pertaining to what we were talking a few minutes ago regarding the Ottoman Empire, etc. I disagree with you 100%. What they're doing is giving you a hook so that you bite that hook in order for Israel to take over Turkey. I wouldn't trust the United States, and now they're talking about F-16s and planes and all that stuff. Yeah, we're going to give you planes, and how's that? And they're going to feign, the Israelis are going to feign worrisome attitudes. Prime Minister already started the show that he doesn't agree with the sale of such advanced airplanes to Turkey. But you have to remember that those planes have an off button that they don't control. The pilots do not control that off button. It's controlled by a satellite. Starlink and other strategic weaponry satellite systems will turn off those planes when the time comes. So when Turkey wanted to attack their opponents, whether it's Israel or whomever is attacking them, that button can be turned off for all the planes that Turkey is supposed to buy from the United States in case there is a war with Israel. So people are not speaking about it. Well, we are speaking about it in this program because that's what they do. They say sell the technology, but like with your car, they can just turn your engine off and you're in the middle of nowhere and oh my God, what happened to my car? Doesn't start, doesn't turn left, doesn't turn right, or it can go whatever way the algorithms and programs in your car can take you. They can literally take over your car, stop it, turn it off, or guide it left or right at will, dude. And that's been happening for almost more than a decade now. Some people have died in suspicious circumstances, driving their cars which they trusted so much. And we know now that cars have surveillance systems that tell you, hey, you have to lift up your face because we cannot see your eyes. No, they can see your eyes. They can control who you're with. They know who you're with. They know who is your friend, who is not your friend. If you have a discussion, if you have a fight with your wife or with some friend, they can use artificial intelligence to tell you that guy is not your friend because of this or because of that, so they can also turn off your engine. So if you think that the United States and Israel are going to give Turkey 20 or 30 planes and not use that turn off button, you have to be kidding me. I mean, Erdogan should know this. And then to say that the United States is doing well, it surprised me when it came to the Young Turks, because normally they do very good journalism. Okay, here from Canada, there's a lot of protest from members of the parliament because they have said what they have noticed, and that is that Canada, the Liberal governments of Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, are doing nothing to help the Palestinian people, are doing nothing to support the United Nations Charter, and then doing nothing but help the state of Israel, while in public giving another picture of the events. This is unacceptable here from Canada. We Canadians don't want that.
I've been arrested for trying to protest war crimes in our synagogues. They are promoting war crimes, they know what they're doing, and they still decided to host it at a synagogue. That is disgusting. That is disgraceful. These people are facilitating war crimes. They're facilitating illegal settlements which the government sanctioned this week. And yet they host it in our synagogues. I'm from this area, I grew up in this area. This is a fucking disgrace.
This event sells property in a legally occupied Palestinian land. This is an illegal event. Sanctions down. Sanctions Assad.
Get back.
He was walking down the road, they charged him, they physically assaulted him, and you are arresting him for being physically assaulted. They physically charged him and assaulted him, and you are arresting him.
A bunch of left-wing activists just got attacked by counter-protesters, and they got arrested by Israeli police for being attacked. I feel like I'm in the West Bank, but I am in London.
We're here today outside the Great Israel Real Estate event, which is an event that's taking place here in London that's auctioning off stolen Palestinian land to the highest bidder. For the last week, we have seen mass public outrage about this event. We've seen over 100 parliamentarians condemn it and call for its cancellation. We've seen major human rights organizations like Amnesty also condemn it and call for its cancellation, and yet it's still going ahead. And that's why we're here today to protest the event and to say that as Palestinians living in London, we will not allow the sale of our lands to happen under our watch.
I've been arrested.
Where the government of Canada, it's a part of a pattern where the government of Canada just can't seem to summon the moral clarity and resolve to criticize both the government of Israel and take meaningful measures to intervene in an ongoing genocide and speak up against groups that are providing political cover for it. We've seen very, very specific targeted measures against, certain activities in the occupied territories around illegal settlements, very, very targeted sanctions. We have the ability to sanction the country of Israel for unprecedented acts of impunity and aggression that are ongoing right now. The invasion of Lebanon is contrary to every single tenet of international law, and it follows hot on the heels of a genocide in Gaza, which is ongoing to this day, as part of a globally destabilizing attack on Iran. The government of Canadians are against all of these things. We're waiting for the government of Canada to show some clarity and some international leadership on this, and criticizing organizations that are providing cover for the actions of the state of Israel should be part of that. But we should also, and we've said this many times, we should be canceling the free trade deal with Israel. We should be invoking sanctions at least commensurate with what we put on Russia around the invasion of Ukraine, which is an act that is not comparable to an actual genocide, which is going on in Gaza. And the government of Canada is trying to have it both ways as usual. And the Carney government has just made send all kinds of mixed messages. When push comes to shove, they're prepared to be lobbied and pushed back. And I think that the theme running through all of this is a question about to whom does the government of Canada feel accountable? And it is not the majority of Canadians, that is clear. It's a part of a path.
Apart from that, we are fighting because Danielle Smith is asking for the separation of Alberta, which is the most productive province in Canada. It produces billions of dollars a year because of the oil revenue. And the federal government is taking as much as they can from Alberta in order to distribute the wealth of Alberta among other provinces that are not as wealthy, even though Canada produces agricultural products big time, and they export agricultural products in monopolies, in trade agreements, etc., as described before in this show, which benefit, of course, the Canadian economy. But the province of Alberta is an oil producer province. Out of the 10 provinces of Canada, is the richest of all. So Danielle Smith is willing to make drill and construct pipelines in BC. Danielle Smith is the governor of the province of Alberta. But the federal government is also approving pipelines through the Rocky Mountains. And that will destroy probably, well, not probably, but in fact, the possibilities of the water that comes from the Rocky Mountains, potable and drinkable water for the citizens of Canada. It's going to be appropriated by the oil and gas industry. And not only that, the artificial intelligence data centers, which are going to take 10% of the 25 billion gallons or liters of water that are used by Canadian industry alone. I'm talking about Alberta, specifically the oil sands, etc. projects. They use 25 billions of potable and drinkable water instead of transitioning from oil and gas to other technologies that was demonstrated by Nikola Tesla. Free energy, very low cost energy that could be handled and administered by the government so that we don't have to pay high prices in energy when there's oil and gas crisis, like because of the Strait of Hormuz, for example. I have said in this program that I disagree with the government when they say that we have to pay international prices domestically when we are oil producers. If we are oil producers, we shouldn't be paying such high cost of gas for our cars, or because everything goes up, inflation. But since Nikola Tesla, the government of Canada has its own scientific science leaders like Mr. Hutchinson, John, I believe his name was John Hutchison, who describe and show us the country and the world anti-gravity projects that he can use using vibration, energy, and frequency, just like Nikola Tesla said before, 100 years ago. In 1943, when he died, the FBI went, took all the patents, all the diagrams, all the blueprints that he had created in order to take that technology. More than 100 years ago, we have Wi-Fi. It took almost 100 years to use Wi-Fi. So very few companies benefit from it. So when the governments are incapable to take what is public for the public, only plutocrats, like is the case of the United States and Europe, take over. And people that are not representative of the people, Saskia Sassin have spoken about that many times. We have mentioned her before in last programs, how poverty has taken over Europe and the Western tradition because of the plutocrats and the families that are taking over, like the Trumps are taking over, making themselves super rich, taking bribes for $100 million planes, making decisions when it comes to the market in oil and gas, so they can make billions of dollars on a weekend for their family and themselves, taking from Venezuela billions of dollars of in marketplace oil barrels in order for him to administrate it from a foreign government in Qatar, in the Gulf states. All this corruption that is representative of the United States of Israel, and Israel is taking over the world, apparently. And now it's going to Central and South America with President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, who has rejected and break all relationships with the genocidal state of Israel, and also have proven that you can have not only dialogue but effectiveness when it comes to the drug trafficking seizing more than 3,000 tons of cocaine from the country, which is affecting the American interests, because American Israeli interests as well as NATO's interests has nothing but war and whatever can make the politicians richer and richer and richer, because all that money that is paid by peoples taking over like 5%, like we announced before, of the GDP from the people are going to go to benefit those congressmen in fiscal paradises, and they all are going to get a bit of the pound of flesh. They all going to get there and bite from the money, the people's money, the taxpayers' money in Europe, creating poverty, displacing what is institutional to privatize what is happening in Canada now. They're trying to privatize the healthcare system here. They're doing it the same in the United Kingdom. And after 10 years of Brexit, 7 prime ministers have been running around the United Kingdom Prime Ministry, what is the name? Downing Street. And none of them have done anything for the people. Richie Sunak, this is woman mayor, the Kirk Starmer, what embarrassing person that is. Europeans and the Ukrainians and Europeans itself, the Ukrainians is a different issue, are suffering the poverty that they shouldn't have been suffering right now, because the protocols of the corrupt politicians that do not represent the peoples in Norway, in Finland, in Netherlands, in of course in the UK, and now the 27 countries in the European Union, are being literally stealing the money. Third world politics are being applied in the European countries, the UK, the United States and Canada. I'm not kidding. Banana republics kind of thing, we're going to privatize everything, we're going to take over, fuck the people, we don't care about the people, we're going to go to war, and whomever opposes us, we're going to get rid of. In the case of Central and South America, we have to get there. The last president that wants to be taken over is President Gustavo Petro. He's still in the seat as president. But a lawyer that is corrupt, that have defended paramilitaries, that is himself a paramilitary by heart, by saying, I'm going to take my rifle, I'm going to shoot whomever comes from my land. The land is not yours, the land is of the peoples. And one of the problems in Colombia, in this case, Central and South America, is that the plutocrats and the corrupt elites there, which have centuries of tradition, they don't want to give the land to the peasants in order to make the land productive. They want to make the land dependent on the United States free trade agreements, which are not free and are not trade agreements, but impositions by force and treaties that are made between banks and between corporations and companies, behind the people's knowledge, signed by the governments, behind the people's knowledge or approval or referendum or etc., in order for their people to import products that they can produce at home.
The so-called free trade agreements are not free trade agreements. In fact, to a large extent, they're not even trade agreements. These are investor right agreements. There's a reason why they're kept secret from the public. And as soon as you look at them, you see why. Notice I say secret from the public, not secret. They're not kept secret. They're not secret to the corporate lawyers and lobbyists who are writing the detailed regulations, of course, in the interests of their constituents, doesn't happen to be the public of the world or their own countries. So these are highly protectionist for the benefit of private power, so-called intellectual property rights, effectively raise tariffs. They're called patents, but which have an enormous impact on economies, great, wonderful for pharmaceutical and media conglomerates and others. Investors, corporations, are given the right to sue governments, something you and I can't do, but a corporation can, to sue governments for harming their potentially future profits. You can figure out what that means, and such cases are already in the courts. They're not in the courts, they go to private trade adjudication groups made up largely of corporate representatives. They're already going on with NAFTA, and we can expect more of them. There are provisions that undermine efforts at regulation, including, incidentally, regulation of environmental dangers. And rather strikingly, the phrase climate change does not appear in these 280 pages, which are illustrative of the whole structure.
And use the certified seeds, because the seeds of their last harvest, Jesus Christ, the seeds of the last harvest cannot be taken by, which we have done for centuries, in order to keep the best seeds, in order to produce better harvests next year. They're not to work anymore. You have to buy only American certified Monsanto, in this case Bayer seeds, because they merged a few years ago, $60 billion merged. And you only have to get certified, because that's what the trade agreements say, behind people's, peasants, farmers' knowledge. Oh, but not only that, you have to pay satellite imagery from your John Deere or your whatever mechanics that you use. And instead of just fixing it yourself, you have to call a special electronical computerized person that's going to ask you for $5,000 to $10,000 to repair your equipment, which also can be turned off when it's convenient for them, especially when you need to harvest what you sow. So the time of harvest is coming. It's been denounced in this program before. You have to pay attention to my programs. And the farmer said, okay, what's happened with my truck? What happened with my equipment? No, you need to call this guy and it's going to cost you $4,000 to $5,000. What? I haven't even harvested what I saw. And you're asking me for money? Yeah, that's what they're doing. And they're losing billions of dollars a year, because the same principle that they use with the F-16s they're going to sell to Turkey, they're using with the farmers in America, and everywhere John Deere or those brands go to sell you equipment. Instead of using the old tractor that you can fix yourself, now you have to pay thousands of dollars more for a program that is going to cut you off whenever they feel like, so that they can make even more money. Corruption, behind corruption, behind corruption, behind corruption. And that is the United States of Israel. The United States of Donald Trump, the Make America Gross Again. Because this is gross, man. This is gross. What is happening in America is nothing but plutocrats and corruption taking over in the name of another country, and creating paramilitary groups in America to take away immigrants or people that are undesirable because they don't agree with Donald Trump. In order to do that, they give ICE $50,000 a year, guaranteed. They will forgive their debts with the universities if they went to university or college. And some other, guarantees for them to do what the state says. You need to read Carl Jung's book, because it explains very clearly what is happening now. It's a prophecy that he wrote in 1956, based on what he knew, and what is happening now. And I do not disagree with him whatsoever. But it's important for us, the country and the world, to understand and react today stand-up politics against what Israel and the state of Israel is doing with our governments, and the influence of this lobby, whether it's the tobacco lobby, the gas, oil and gas industry, but the most dangerous one is the state of Israel, big time. What they're doing with the president of Colombia right now is trying to judicialize him for the good things he did for the Colombian people. In other words, we want to take over, like in the book of Apocalypse. Nobody can sell or buy. Nobody can do. It's just evil after evil against us, the country and the world, in the Western tradition, in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Finland, everywhere around the world. 5% of GDP. NATO is going against Russia. Let's kill the Russians. Let's divide Russians, cut it into pieces, and take all the resources and distribute us amongst the mandate, like in the Ottoman Empire, of the Brits, the French, the Americans, the Israelis, you name it. Russia, stand your ground. Stick together with China and don't let this happen. Show us, the country and the world, like Iran or Iran, that you can resist. And we should resist here in Canada, there in America, because I'm surprised that there's not a civil war yet in the United States of Israel, of America, because like I talked with Josh Galloway, Chris Hedges is speaking about it, Colonel Douglas McGregor is speaking about it, Analysts from the CIA are speaking about it. And what is that? Revolutions. We need another revolutions, like I said before in this program 11 years ago. The wars for independence are back. And not only because of the violence that we are being submitted to, but because of the corruption itself and plutocratism. Plutocrats that are taking over social institutions. What is social is important. And now Donald Trump is saying that this Mandani in New York is a socialist, that President of Colombia is a socialist, a communist, while he is using communism and socialism to protect his entourage and the people that he are making business with, like it's the bankers of Israel and many others, because this idiot, President of the United States, I'm saying, has go bankrupt 6 or 7 times. And he's speaking about how to do business. He's a bad television star that became president. And he wants everybody in the rest of the world to be like him. And there's plenty of people that want to be like him because they have never worked in their lives. And if they have worked, they work for the wrong side. And they don't want nothing but what is public to be privatized. So only very, very, very few people can have the world for themselves. And if we don't get it this way, we're going to destroy the world with us, says Israel, because it's obvious that Israel is going to use nukes against Iran and against Turkey. But like I said, if they have a turn-off button for the planes, F-16s, and as they have it as tractors and machinery for agricultural purposes, and they do that, and they have it in your car, in your Ford, in your Nissan, whatever your brand you're driving, this is nothing but the control of the welcome to the machine, but it's an evil machine and it's a demonic machine that is nothing but war, killing and assassinating people in the Caribbean in the name of the war against drugs. What they want is the drug capital to be part of their budget, but the same with war, the same with corporations like Palantir, Nvidia, and all these that want a piece of the flesh, pound of flesh. They all, like piranhas, want a piece, and they all gonna kill each other until they come together and say they can only be one. It's a self-destructive program, this Zionist idealism of plutocracy, and I wish that the United States understand that Canada understands that, and vote for me, Canadians. Now, we need to find another party here in Canada, fund it, and fight for us, for the country, for the world, because the wars for independence are back. And the independence this time is not only the violence and the ideology or nationalism, which used to be in the 19th century, but is corruption and to make and to privatize what is public. In other words, what characterized European countries in the past, that we look for Europe, and the European countries came to America in order to protect their new understanding. That's why they revolt in Europe and they moved to America, whether French, Canada, British Canadian, and the United States, because they wanted to make and build a better country than the ones they have there, corrupted also and possessed by plutocrats and business affairs like Hudson Bay and many others. They came to America, they created a better country, and like we talked with George Galloway, revolution was necessary in order to create independent countries. But are we independent now? We're not. We are in the hands of plutocrats and corrupt people, so corrupt and so ambitious and so greedy, like Facebook, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all these people who are using our money to make themselves super rich thanks to government corruption, which had given them our destiny and our future in their hands in order for them to throw away as many thousands of people as they can, don't pay Medicare, take everything on their hands, get super rich with the money that we are paying in our taxes when we work. And not only that, you see that against us with groups like ICE, etc. So we shut up. There was the mustard season, not anymore, so it's just regular. Hey. Good morning.
Good morning.
Same here.
Federico is in Canada on revolution in Europe. When, Federico? When does it start?
Hello, George. Good afternoon here from Canada. Yes, George, it's very difficult to see that, but Europe used to be the beacon that everybody wanted to imitate in every government around the world, in philosophy, in mathematics, in sciences, and everything. But apparently in the 20th and 21st century has become nothing but subservient for elites and the power of money, which has the power to corrupt everything. Everything that is public and everything that is for the people and by the people. We talked before many years ago about Plato and how what is justice is for only for the powerful. And I think nothing has changed. But in the 21st century, when we have such information available, I agree with Colonel McGregor when he said that it's time for a revolution. Even Chris Hedges is mentioning about revolution. And I think that the president of Colombia, now that the elections have been pillaged, he's refusing to leave his seat in Colombia unless the scrutiny of the votes are finished, because nobody believes that the far-right lawyer supported by Trump and Israel is the real president in that country. So when we see all this happening, George, it's impossible not to understand that we, the people, have to react today to these matters. And the only way to do that, I agree with Chris Hedges and Colonel McGregor, is through revolutions, because the rich people has taken over. I don't know what you think about that happening in Colombia, George, but if we don't react today in Europe and reclaim our right to be, we the citizens, to be in charge of what is public and the treasure of our countries, the rich are always going to take over like they have done, especially the lobbyists, whether it's tobacco, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's, of course, the state of Israel, which has affected the UK in such manners that you have had 7 prime ministers in the last 10 years. And that is all because of the influence of the super rich. I just wanted to say that. What is your point on that? Because in Latin America, these people are going to go.
Let me deal with it. Let me deal with it. It's a legitimate question. First, I don't know why revolution got such a bad name in North America and in Britain. After all, George Washington was a revolutionary. Picked up a gun and began the American Revolution. So revolution per se is not a bad thing. How can it be? The United States would not exist if not for the American Revolution. That is such a commonplace, but not often said. Ditto in Britain, we had an absolute monarchy until Oliver Cromwell led a revolution and executed the absolute monarch, who was absolutely decapitated. And a very brief period of parliamentary dictatorship ensued. Didn't last long, but it's not remembered badly in England. It is in Ireland, but not in England. He's got a pride of place statue right in front of the House of Commons. The House of Commons wouldn't be the House of Commons if not for Oliver Cromwell. And therefore, there is nothing per se wrong with a people who cannot achieve the vitally necessary change by the existing rules and regulations, because they are corrupted, and by God they are corrupted, and not just in Colombia, not just in Peru. They steal elections in England, I'm here to tell you. So what's happening in Colombia is as plain as the nose on your face. The fascists are trying to steal the presidency of the republic, and the masses would be very stupid to allow them to do so. And they must make a revolutionary stand in favor of democracy. I've seen the wafer thin, or what they call it in the British press, the razor thin right-wing majority. I've seen it in the back of one truck. I mean, I'm used to bin bags full of fraudulent votes coming in the middle of the night into the counting station. But this was one whole truck, and that whole truck contained more fraudulent ballots than the razor-thin majority. And there must have been 100, 500, 5,000 such trucks all over Colombia after the close of poll. Peru, if anything, even more egregious. If you believe Fujimori won the presidency of Peru, I've got a bridge in London I could sell you going cheap. So one mustn't fetishize form over content. The form of democracy, if it has no democratic content, is a fraud. I was making the point on social media today, if the Chinese play their cards right, they could end up like us, with 7 leaders in 10 years, bankrupt and tearing each other apart. A society in tumultuous decline. We could call it democracy.
This is fascism, and not only that, this is demonology 101. And this is Carl Jung's expression in his book, that you should read in order to understand how he speaks about citizenry and politics, if you want to get a little closer, even though it was written in 1956, about how the governments and the plutocrats are working against us, the country and the world. Revolutions are back, the wars for independence are back, period. And we need to fight these wars. And we ask for the generals, the colonels, the soldiers to understand this, because generals, you have to say, this is wrong. I didn't sign for this. I didn't become a soldier to kill innocent people and to make the world better for me. How come these generals, instead of living on a pension like everybody else, live like kings? Because they work for the revolving door and they become advisors to companies and corporations now that they have been in the army and have the experience of corruption with the Pentagon since 2001 and the so-called Terrorism Act of 1917. But not only that, the 2001 terrorism, 9/11, that was the excuse for Israel to take over the United States and the rest of the world, if we let them. So for us, for the country, for the world, stop this madness. Iran, please resist. Central and South America, please resist. And we, the people, do not agree, in the case of Colombia, for that corrupt lawyer to take over the office, when we expect from the president and the opposition to support the generals, the colonels, the soldiers, the battalions, each and every one citizen in Colombia, to stand their ground and don't let this irresponsible, which is not even Colombian, he refused the Colombian citizenship, the new president of elected by fraud and not by the people, on a very tight election as always. The same happened in Romania, the same happened in Central and South America. It's always too close, 200,000 votes, 100 votes, 1 vote, but the guy won. And who's that guy? American Zionist interests, whether it's in Europe, in the Netherlands, in Australia, in New Zealand, politicians which do not represent us, the country and the world, in the Western tradition whatsoever. And we have to stop that plutocracy and that influence, malign and demonic influence that the state of Israel has all around the world, and especially in the Western tradition, with nuclear powers. Even they can start a war on their own with their nuclear powers. I hope that China, Russia support President Petro in Colombia and support whomever is for us, for the country, and for the world, and for what is public, instead of privatizing everything like it's happening here in Canada with the separation of Alberta, the most productive province in the Canadian federal government. Now they want to separate and become Americans. Okay, that's not going to happen. There's a plebiscite that is already running, and the election will be this month or the next, in October and November, for Senate, etc. Vote for me, guys. I'm not even in the list, but if you vote for me, I will make myself stand against these corrupt governments. The liberal governments of Canada and the Conservatives are no different. They support Israel, Zionism, and the American corrupted form of government which is anti-democratic, is anti-human, inhuman, and is demonic in essence. Like when the State of Israel brushes down in front of us, the country and the world, the United Nations Charter, and accuses us of being stupid and dumb, and still says that genocide is okay, and they will do it with whomever opposes us, whether in America and Europe, and they want to use Europeans and Americans to die for them. Well, they keep committing genocide and corrupting all governments around the world in the name of God, using evangelical ignorance, which we have proven here. Genesis 12:3 is not valid, hence the prophets, hence the Pentateuch, hence Jesus. So there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian relationship, man. The only thing we have in common is that Jesus was Jew, but Jesus was against the Jewish state, which is the golden calf that were built in the days of Moses when he came down with the Ten Commandments. They were already adoring what they still adore: corruption, the power of corruption, homicide, genocide, dementia, inhumanity, the destruction of all treatises, the empowerment by force and sword of anyone that supports freedom, understanding, whatever you call democracy is, people for the people, by the people, because there's other instances that are not democratic but work for the people, like it was Libya, Syria, secular countries that were destroyed by the State of Israel, by the will of the State of Israel, in the corrupted government, the most corrupted government in the world that the Apocalypse, the book of Revelation 13 speaks so well about. For us, for the country, for the world, today on Stand Up Politics, we speak about everything, and please don't believe anything that Donald Trump says, Mr. Erdogan, unless there's other interest that you want to protect Mr. Erdogan. But anyway, Russia and China are together, and that will maybe bring the war home to us, like it was the announcement in this program, that not only that the wars for independence are back from the plutocrats and the corrupt elites, and the super rich, which shouldn't have so much granted public money for themselves, like it's Facebook, YouTube, these platforms, etc. But my company, Communications, which doesn't receive a dime in grants, because maybe I'm not pro-Israel, so I don't receive any grants. This is the company I created, and I don't receive a dime for the development of my company. So if anybody is interested in supporting this company in order to compete with YouTube and Facebook, etc., and create better information for us, for the country, and for the world, well, support us. We are on Patreon, on React Today. Follow this show, and let's react today. Today on Stand Up Politics is speaking the truth, whether it hurts us or not, but the division that is causing against us. People that I knew from 40 years are now cursing me, using foul language against me. I have very little tolerance for that, and that's their problem. I can use coarse language and be nasty and use foul language. I don't want to equal with them when they say that Israel is okay and that corruption is okay, that elect president in Colombia, a corrupt paramilitary person, is okay, etc. When everything, organizations, human rights organizations, the treaties, the United Nations, the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, all these issues that were created after millions and millions of people were killed unnecessarily, are being supported by these persons that used to be my friends. I cannot be friends with people like that any longer, despite 40 years. And what I cannot take is their insults. And the fact that we forgive, as we are people that want a change in this world and better revolution, that doesn't mean that we don't have the right to defend ourselves. And we will, because you're not the only ones who know how to shoot a weapon, ICE and you others, whatever. I'm just calling for peace. Yes, because what the governments are doing right now, thanks to God in Canada is not as in the United States, is using people's money to support assassins and killers, like it was the case of this Mexican person that President Claudia Sheinbaum is asking from the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice from the United States to explain how come they have to kill innocent people that have worked for that country and make money just like immigrants do everywhere they go. Much to talk about this. Leave your comments below and support the program on Patreon. Make it known, because I'm very censored here in Canada by Bill C-11, Bill C-18 and Bill C-63. For us, for the country, for the world, hope to see you next time in the next edition of Stand Up Politics, part of React Today, 11 years, part of the World Project. Au revoir, bye bye, hasta pronto.
I have directed my officials to summon the Israeli ambassador regarding the mistreatment of civilians aboard the flotilla. What we've seen, including the video shared by Itamar Ben-Gvir, is deeply troubling and absolutely unacceptable. Canada has already imposed strict sanctions on Ben-Gvir, including asset freezes and a travel ban in response to his repeated incitement of violence. The protection of civilians and respect for human dignity must be upheld at all times.
Canada, the US, UK, Germany, and other allies refuse to call the crime by its name, genocide. Canada and other nations, and worse, Canada and other nations continue to arm Israel, with Canada using a legal loophole to continue weapons sales. These Western governments, through their actions and their refusals to act, have effectively endorsed Israel's genocidal project of wiping out all Palestinians in Gaza, making their leaders criminally complicit in genocide. This persistent refusal to intervene or even call the crime by its name reveals an alignment with Israel's genocidal ambitions. Canada's government, under both Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, has also perfected the art of criminal hypocrisy. Canada claims to defend human rights and the rule-based international order, yet when genocide unfolded in Gaza, when people were slaughtered, it violated legal obligations under the UN Charter and the Genocide Convention. It has refused to take the minimum actions required of any state when another nation commits genocide. If Mark Carney were truly committed to the international order, as he spoke of in Davos, he would impose a full arms embargo on Israel, sanction all Israeli political and military leaders for genocide, suspend the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, support South Africa's genocide case at the ICJ, as NATO allies Belgium, Iceland, the Netherlands, Turkey, and Spain have done. It would expel the Israeli ambassador and recall our ambassador from Israel, and launch genocide prosecutions under Canadian law for any Canadians who have traveled to Israel to join the Israeli military since 2023. These are the bare minimum acts of any nation or political leader claiming to have a moral compass in the face of genocide, something which Canada and its leaders seem to have thrown away. Canada
adopting their state bureaucracy, and even wearing their clothes. Again and again, the East essentially digested the West and the nomads. How has Iran managed